Hello and welcome to TigerVQ. In this new video series, I'm going to answer what I consider to be the most interesting questions asked in the comments for the videos on the channel. In this video, the first in the video series, we're going to deal with a question from Mitali. And Mitali has a really interesting question about VBA coding and specifically about loop control. Now the example we're going to look at relates to one of the Excel VBA for Beginners video series, which is on our Excel VBA for Beginners playlist. I'll put a link to this video series in the description so that you can check it out. I'm not going to explain all the coding here, but definitely go back to that video series. You'll be able to understand it. So let's go to Mitali's query. And she says, is there a possibility of taking a user input for the number of sheets that we want to duplicate? And this video series deals with the topic of duplicating sheets in Excel, potentially a real time-consuming, annoying thing to have to do. And the video series looks at using VBA to speed it up and eventually doing it at the click of a button. Now, I'm just going to make Mitali's comments small there, and let's get into the Visual Basic Editor. So how is the code working? And we're looking to duplicate sheets, and this is the routine here, duplicate many sheets. So the routine has an informative name. That helps us to understand what's going on. Another thing that helps us to understand what's going on is I've put annotations in here. Remember, if you just leave an inverted comma in the VBA editor, then it's going to turn green, and Excel will understand that as an annotation. Excel will ignore it when it runs the code. Really useful for us because we can leave notes there in English to remind us what the code is about, remind ourselves or our colleagues what the code is about. Really useful for me today. It was about 1.5 years ago I wrote this code, so to be able to read the annotations in English really helps me understand what's going on. Anyway, this routine is duplicating sheets. We've got a database here, and all we're looking to do is to create a new sheet for each line in the database. That's what the code's doing. So what are the main features of this code? Well, I can see the main construct here is a loop, and I can quickly identify the loop because it's a for next loop, so it begins with for here and ends in next at the bottom. Now loops are such a powerful concept, really useful in coding because they allow us to repeat a specific chunk of code. In this case, we're going to repeat the code below for and above next. The for and next commands are indicating the beginning and the end of the code that we're looping through. How many times are we looping through it? Well, that's the topic for this video. We want to be able to control the number of times we loop through the code because that in turn will control how many sheets we want to create. And that's what Mitali's question is. How can I control the loop so that it goes through it a certain number of times? Maybe I don't want to duplicate all the sheets. I just want to duplicate a certain number of sheets. So how's the loop control working at the moment? Well, we've got a for next loop here. So the first line of the loop, the for statement, that controls how many times we're going through the loop. And we've got a fairly simple line of code here. For counter equals 1. Counter is the integer variable. Remember, we usually need to declare a variable to control a loop. You can go back to our beginners coding videos if you're not getting any of this, by the way. But we need an integer variable to control the loop. So for counter equals 1, 2, and then we've got a reference to a cell in the worksheet. Now this is interesting. Sheets 1, range F5. So cell F5 on the first sheet in the workbook. So what have we got there? Cell F5, we've got a count A formula there. So we've got a formula and VBA code working together to control the number of times we go through the loop. This count A formula is counting the number of lines in the database. So that's a powerful combination there, but let's just simplify this first as a starting point, and let's hard code some values here. So for counter equals 1 to 3, and then let's just run the routine and see what happens. Try to develop an understanding of what's going on here. I'm going to delete the existing sheets first. There's a button here that allows us to delete the sheets before we get started. Then I'm going to hit duplicate many sheets. That's going to run through the code that we've just tweaked in the Visual Basic Editor. Now what's happened? Well, we can see 3 new sheets have appeared. That seems to make sense because we've said for counter equals 1 to 3. So it's going to go through the loop 3 times. And we've got 3 new sheets. That seems to make sense to us. But one thing I do want to deal with now is we've got 472, 695, 470. If we look at the names of the sheets, 470, 695, 472. So we've got the right sheets, but they're not quite in the right order. And I can remember when I shot this video series, this is something I was thinking about, but I'd like those sheets to display in order. So we have CO472 first, CO695, followed by CO470. So where is the line of code that's dealing with the order of the sheets? Maybe you could pause the video now, just think about that yourself. Well, this line of code, even if you don't have any VBA knowledge, you can probably tell from the English. And this is a good thing about VBA. It's fairly user-friendly. We can usually understand the English and see what's going on. So this is the line of code that's controlling where to position the sheet that we copy. And we're saying copy it after the second sheet in the workbook. And if we look back at the workbook, that's exactly what's happened. Every time we copy a sheet, it copies after the second sheet in the workbook. So in effect, it becomes the 3rd sheet in the workbook. That's not great for us though, because it's lining up the sheets in reverse order. It would be much more logical, intuitive to line them up in normal order, non-reverse order. So how might we do that? Well, we want Excel, we want to know and communicate the number of sheets in the workbook. Now, when we begin, there's 2 sheets in the workbook. I'll just go back to the start point, delete many sheets. Now we've got 2 sheets in the workbook. So the line of code is going to work for the first situation, but clearly as we go through the code, the number of sheets is going to increase. So we actually need a dynamic coding concept here that can handle that. So you might want to pause the video, think about how you might do that. But a line of code that's going to help us here is worksheets.count. Now worksheets.count returns the number of worksheets in the workbook. That's great for us here because we're saying copy after, and then the number is going to be the total number of sheets in the workbook. So in effect, it's going to copy after the last sheet in the workbook. Now this worksheets.count line of code is going to update every time we run through the code. So it should be exactly what we need. So let's see if it has the desired effects. Just going to delete the sheets and then, yep, only 2 sheets in the workbook. Hit duplicate, and now what have we got? We've got CO472, 695, CO470, and that corresponds to the order we've got here. So we seem to have solved that one. We've got the sheets displaying in the right order using a really nice line of code here. Worksheets.count, that returns the number of worksheets in the workbook. Okay, so it seems to be going well, but we want to control the loop here. Going back to the topic of the video, we want to control the loop, and we've hard coded some values in, and this seems to be working perfectly well. And indeed, if you're comfortable interacting with the Visual Basic Editor, this approach might be fine, but I know most, if not all of my customers, they're not going to be comfortable interacting with the Visual Basic Editor. So we need a way to create some flexibility so they can control the loop, control the number of sheets to be duplicated by, without having to go into the Visual Basic Editor. So what options have we got? Well, the first option would be to use some cells in the workbook. And I'm just going to put some borders around some cells here. So let's start in cell, position this a little bit better. There we go. Let's start in cell E5 and let's end in cell E6. And let's create the code to allow that to happen. So we need to put the reference to the cell in here now. I think it was E5. Yep. E5.value. And then let's just leave this hard-coded value in here for now. And let's see what happens. Let's put a 1 in this cell. So Excel is going to see 1 from this cell reference, which is E5. And then it's going to continue with this hard-coded reference, the number we put in, which is 3. So let's delete the sheets, duplicate the sheets again. And again, we've got 3 sheets. This seems to make sense. Let's change this value to 2. So you might want to think, what's likely to happen now? Clear out the sheets, run the code again. Now we've got 2 sheets. That's because in the code, Excel has taken the value of 2 from E5 and then gone from 2 to 3. So it's gone through the loop twice. So this seems to be working well, and this means that we're giving the user some control over that loop, some control over this duplication process. Let's look at controlling the end of the loop as well. Let's use the same idea. Let's use a cell in the on the worksheet. I'm going to recycle some existing code. Always a good idea to copy paste code that you know works, and then just tweak it, just adjust this reference here. So we've got the value in E5 controlling the beginning and the value in E6 controlling the end. So we're building some flexibility into the workbook now. So let's go from 2 to 5, which means I'll expect to see, I think, 695 to 646, something like that. Let's give this a go. Duplicate 695, 470, 671, and 680. Yep, so it's just given us 4 there, so 2 to 5. That seems to make sense. Then let's try a bigger number here. Let's try 15. 2 to 15. Clear out the sheets with the delete many sheets code button. Duplicate there. And then you can see we've got a few more sheets lining up here. It's gone all the way down to 573. Let's go back to the database there, 573. Let's just count these out. I would expect to see 13 or so here. 13, 573. There we go, we've got 15 there, but we begun with 695, so we've actually got 14, which seems to be right for the numbers we've put in. So it's taken these lines, the lines I've selected there, taken those lines and created the sheets for those lines. And that's because of the way we've controlled this loop. And clearly you can put whatever values you want in there. I'm using fairly small values. If you've got a bigger database, you could use bigger values there. So that's beginning to give us some flexibility there, just using simple cells in the workbook. So what are some other ideas for controlling this loop? Is there anything more exciting than just using a cell in the workbook? Well, we can improve the user interaction maybe by using an input box. An input box is something that flashes up and the user types something in, a good way for gathering information from the user, and a bit more, certainly less boring than simply using a worksheet input. So let's have a look at the input box code. Input box, and then the prompt is the text that's going to appear in the box. So let's say type in start points. And then now I'm just following the prompts that Excel is giving me. I don't know this code off by heart. I'm using the prompts that the VBA editor is giving me to help. So the title, speech marks there, and the title is going to be, let's have input as the title. Close the bracket again there. Okay, so that's the code we've got, and the structure of the layout of this line of code is exactly the same. For counter equals something to something else. We started for counter equals 1 to 3, and we're just changing the options, getting the information from different places, getting it from a cell in the spreadsheet, getting it from an input box, but the structure of this line of code is actually the same. So let's give this a go then. Clear out the sheets, delete the sheets. Okay, so we've now got an input box coming up here. Type in the start point. Well, I know the end point is going to be 15. So let's type in the start point as 14. See if we can just get a couple of sheets there. There we go. So I've got 344 and 573. Let's identify those. There we go, 344 and 573. And 344 is, let's have a look. Go back to the top here. 344 is, yeah, 14 rows down the database. So that's a nice way to do it. Let's just duplicate that for the other side here. And I'm going to run out of room, so I'm going to use an underscore here, which means I can continue the code on the next line. So space underscore, that allows me to continue this line of code on the next line. Let's just copy paste this in there. And I've repeated some code that I didn't need there. That seems to do the job. So now we're expecting two input boxes, one input box for the start point, one input box for the end point. Delete the existing sheets. So we've got a start point here, let's have 1. Okay, end point, let's have 5 here. So expecting to have 5 sheets created, duplicated in the workbook. So that seems to be working well. So we've got a few options there for controlling the loop. First we did hard coding some numbers into the code, works perfectly well, but it doesn't offer a lot of flexibility for the users. You can offer more flexibility by referencing a cell in the spreadsheet, and then a nice interactive feature is to use this input box idea. Okay, so a few different ideas there for controlling the loop. Let's have a look at one more idea, and let's use a different construct to control this loop. At the moment we're using for next, and that's probably the easiest way of controlling the loop. But what are some other ways of controlling loops? Well, you may have heard of do until, and let's give this a go. So I'm just going to comment out. I'm going to make this an annotation, the original construct we had for beginning and ending the loop. I'm going to comment those out, make them annotations. Excel will ignore them. And then let's try do until. Let's use this worksheets.count line. Let's just hard code a value of 10 in there. Okay, so we've got do until here. So this is the way of beginning the loop, opening the loop. And when we open a loop, we have to remember to close it. I always say, when you open a loop, close it straight away so you don't forget to do it later. So what's the line of code we need to close a do until loop? Well, very simply, we can just put a loop here. There we go. Now I'm reasonably happy with that, but if we're using do and loop, then our counter variable, remember we've got an integer variable here that's controlling some of the position. We're combining it with offset down here to control the position of the data, control which sheets we reference. Now, because we're using do until, this counter variable will not automatically increment. It will not automatically increase by 1 every time we go through the loop. If we do for next, then the variable you use to control the loop will automatically increase by 1 every time you go through. If we're using do until, we need to do that process manually. We need to put a line of code into the loop to make that happen. So I'm just going to use counter equals counter plus 1 here. So that's going to manually, if you like, increment the variable. And remember, we want that counter variable to increase by 1 every time we go through the loop. That helps us to control position and possibly some other things in the code. I don't want to go into massive detail on that at the moment. But the interesting thing is how we're controlling the loop. And we're saying do until worksheets.count equals 10. Now we've already encountered this line of code worksheets.count in this video. This tells us how many worksheets are in the spreadsheet. Remember, the routine is duplicating a sheet. So that number, the total number of sheets in the workbook, is going to continue increasing by 1. So all we're saying is do this loop until this condition is met. And this condition in English is until there's 10 sheets in the workbook. So this is another interesting way for us to control the code. So we've got do until and loop, and we've controlled the variable there, just having a quick look through, sense checking the code. Looks okay to me, but the only way to find out is to give it a go. So I've deleted the sheets again. Okay, there we go. Seems to work without any hitches. Just gonna get a sense for how many sheets we've got here. Okay, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 sheets there, I think that was. We're going to CO128. That seems to be about right, because remember we've got 2 sheets in the workbook anyway, this Dep 1 sheet and this test sheet. So if there's 2 sheets and 8 reports, that would make 10 sheets. So that seems to be about right. So there we're using, controlling the loop, they're using the do, until and loop way of controlling the loop there. So with loops, 2 main constructs, the for next loop, that's probably the simplest loop to get to know first, and then do until presents interesting possibilities. We can put a condition there, do until there's this number of worksheets in the workbook, do until a certain cell value equals something. We could even say do until a certain time, because Excel can tell what the time is, so we can put in all sorts of conditions there to do exactly what we need to do. And that's what we're looking to do, to create flexibility, to be able to respond to different situations. Try to avoid the situation where we've got some code that's doing something, but we can't tweak it, we can't get it working for us. By having knowledge of these different constructs, different ways of controlling loops, different types of loops, that's going to broaden your range of skills and allow you to create spreadsheets and make them flexible, get them working for precisely your needs, precisely what you're trying to do. So just broadening your vocabulary in code is going to allow you to create better stuff. So that's as far as we're going to go in this video. But thank you very much to Mitali. Her question was the inspiration for this video, and hopefully you feel you got something out of that, different ways of controlling loops. Hopefully you feel you push the coding forward a little bit. And do leave questions in the comments. I will judge if they are of educational value. If they look good, and obviously I can only do a certain amount, but if they look good, I may consider making a video about it. So this has been the TigerVQ series, first video in the series. I hope to see you in another video in this series, or at least in another video on the channel.